In a gritty Chicago pawn shop, a 12-year-old boy stood crying, holding a fake gold watch he needed to sell to save his dying sister. The cruel shop owner laughed at him, offering him pennies for what he called trash, but a poor, elderly watchmaker in the corner stepped in. He lied to the shop owner, claiming the cheap watch was a rare antique treasure, and gave the boy his entire life savings, money he needed for his own heart medication, to buy it. The boy ran to the hospital and saved his sister, never knowing the watch was actually a fake, and that the old man had chosen to become homeless that rainy night just to save a stranger's life. 15 years later, that lie would return to change their lives forever. Before we go deep into this, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The rain in Chicago didn't wash the city clean, it just made the dirt slicker. It was a Tuesday evening in November, the kind of weather that felt like a personal punishment. Inside Vane's Pawn and Loan, the air smelled like old copper coins and stale cigarette smoke. Leo stood at the high glass counter. He was 12 years old, soaked to the bone in a hoodie that was 2 sizes too big. He was shaking, not just from the freezing rain, but from a terror so pure it felt like a hand squeezing his lungs shut. He held a small, wet velvet box in his hands like it was a bomb that might explode if he let go. "Please," Leo begged. His voice cracked, high and desperate. "Look at it again. My dad left it for us before he went away. He said it was solid gold. He said it was worth thousands." Mr. Vane, the owner of the shop, was a large man with grease under his fingernails and eyes that had seen too much misery to care about one crying kid. He laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound that seemed to suck the air out of the room. He tossed the watch back onto the glass counter. It landed with a hollow clunk, not the heavy, satisfying thud of real gold. "Your dad was a liar, kid," Vane sneered. He picked his teeth with the corner of a business card. "It's gold-plated brass. The glass is plastic. The insides are cheap Chinese junk. It's a knockoff. A toy. I'll give you $15 for the metal scrap, and that's me being a saint." 15. Leo screamed. Tears finally spilled out of his eyes, hot tracks down his cold cheeks. "I need 400. My sister is sick. She's going to be taken away if I don't pay the hospital deposit tonight. Please, sir, look closer. You have to be wrong. Get out," Vane barked. He pointed a fat finger at the door. "Take your trash and get out before I call the cops for loitering. I run a business, not a charity." Leo grabbed the watch, clutching it to his chest. He fell to his knees on the dirty linoleum floor. He couldn't leave. If he walked out that door with $15, Isabella was gone. The state would take her. He would never see her again. He started to sob, a loud, broken sound that echoed through the quiet shop. "Please," he whispered to the floor. "Please, somebody help me." In the back corner of the shop, hidden behind a wire mesh cage where the repair tools were kept, Arthur sat frozen. Arthur was 68 years old. He wore a gray wool cardigan with holes in the elbows and thick glasses that magnified his kind, tired eyes. He was a watch repairman who rented this tiny corner from Vane because he had lost his own shop years ago. Arthur had heard everything. He looked at the boy crying on the floor. He saw the wet sneakers with the soles flapping open. He saw the desperation that only comes when you are about to lose the only person you love. Arthur looked down at his workbench. There was an old, wooden clock sitting there. It looked broken, but it had a secret compartment. Arthur reached out with a trembling hand and opened the back panel. Inside was a roll of cash held together by a rubber band. $450. It was every cent Arthur had in the world. It was his rent money for the tiny room upstairs, which was due tonight. It was the money for his heart medication, which ran out tomorrow. If he gave it away, he was dead. He would be evicted. He would be homeless in the freezing Chicago rain with a bad heart. Arthur looked at the money. Then he looked at the boy. He closed his eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. He thought about his own mistakes. He thought about his grandson, Julian, who he hadn't seen in 10 years because of his own pride and failures. He couldn't save his own family. But maybe, just maybe, he could save this one. Arthur stood up. His old knees popped. He walked out of the wire cage. "Let me see the watch," Arthur said. His voice was quiet, but it had a strength that made Leo look up. That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment a lie saved a life and ruined another. To understand why a 12-year-old boy was begging for his life on the floor of a pawn shop, you have to know what happened 6 hours earlier at St. Jude's Hospital. Leo sat in the hard plastic chair next to his sister Isabella's bed. She was 7 years old, but in the big hospital bed, amidst the white sheets and tubes, she looked tiny. She was pale, her skin almost gray. She was struggling to breathe. The oxygen mask covered half her face, fogging up with every shallow gasp. The machine next to her beeped in a slow, rhythmic way that terrified Leo. It sounded like a countdown. Isabella had severe pneumonia. Their mother had died 2 years ago from cancer. Their father had left 6 months ago, leaving nothing but a note saying, "I can't do this anymore," and that gold watch on the kitchen table. Since then, Leo and Isabella had been on their own, bouncing between cheap motels and neighbors' couches, hiding from social services. A doctor walked in. Dr. Evans. He looked kind, but tired. He held a clipboard that decided their fate. "Leo," Dr. Evans said gently, kneeling down to be eye level with the boy. "We've stabilized her breathing for now, but she has fluid in her lungs. She needs a specific course of antibiotics, and she needs to stay here for a week to be monitored. If we send her home now, the infection will come back, and her lungs might fail." "Okay," Leo said, standing up, trying to look taller than 12. "Do it. Give her the medicine." Dr. Evans sighed. He put the clipboard down on the bed. "The social worker checked your file, Leo. There is no insurance. There is no parent. Your father isn't answering calls. The number is disconnected." "I'm her guardian," Leo said fiercely. "I take care of her. You're 12, son. The hospital administration, they have rules. They can't treat her for free indefinitely. The deposit for the medication and the room is $400. If you can't pay it by 8 p.m. tonight, I am forced to discharge her." Dr. Evans looked pained. "And because there is no parent to take her home, Child Protective Services is already on their way. If she is discharged, they will pick her up. They will put her in the state foster system. They will separate you." Leo felt the blood drain from his face. The foster system. He knew what that meant. They would take Isabella to a home for girls. They would put him in a home for boys. He would lose her. She was the only person in the world who loved him. She was the only reason he woke up in the morning. $400, Leo whispered. "By 8 p.m., Dr. Evans said. "I'm sorry, Leo. I bought you as much time as I could. I held them off for hours." Leo looked at Isabella. She was sleeping, her chest rattling with every breath. He leaned over and kissed her forehead. It was burning hot with fever. "I'll get it," Leo promised her sleeping form. "I have Dad's watch. It's gold. He told me it was worth a fortune. I'll sell it." He grabbed the velvet box from his backpack. He ran out of the hospital room, past the nurse's station, and out into the rainy streets of Chicago. He didn't have money for a bus. He ran. He ran for 12 blocks without stopping, his lungs burning, holding on to the hope that his father hadn't lied to them. He ran until he saw the neon sign of Vane's Pawn and Loan buzzing in the gloom. Back in the shop, the silence was heavy. Arthur stood over Leo, his hand held out. "Let me see it, son," Arthur repeated. Mr. Vane scoffed from behind the counter. "Arthur, sit down. Don't waste my time. The kid has a piece of junk. Go back to your cage." Arthur ignored him. He gently took the watch from Leo's shaking hands. He pulled a small jeweler's loupe, a magnifying glass, from his pocket and screwed it into his eye. He bent over the watch under the bright fluorescent lights. Arthur knew watches. He had been fixing them for 50 years. He knew the weight of gold. He knew how a real Swiss movement sounded, like a heartbeat. He knew the difference between a diamond and glass. He looked at Leo's watch. It was garbage. It was a fake Patek Philippe made of polished brass. The gold paint was already chipping off near the stem. The glass was cheap plastic. The movement inside was a battery-operated toy mechanism worth maybe $3. It wasn't worth the velvet box it sat in. Vane was right. It was a scam. The father had lied. Arthur looked up. He saw Leo watching him. The boy was holding his breath. His eyes were wide, red, and filled with a desperate, terrifying hope. He looked like a drowning person waiting for a rope. Arthur thought about his own life. He was alone. His wife had died 10 years ago. His daughter had moved away and stopped calling because he was poor. He had a grandson he hadn't seen since the boy was a baby. All he had was his corner in this shop, his tools, and his secret stash of money for his heart pills. If he told the truth, the boy would walk out. His sister would be taken away. The boy's life would be broken forever. He would become just another tragedy of the city. If he lied, well, Arthur knew the cost of a lie. Arthur stood up straight. He took the loop out of his eye. He looked Mr. Vane right in the face. "You are a fool, Vane," Arthur said, his voice steady and sharp. "You call yourself a pawnbroker? You wouldn't know treasure if it bit you on the nose." Vane blinked, surprised by the old man's tone. "Excuse me." "This," Arthur said, holding up the cheap fake watch like it was the crown jewels, "is a 1958 prototype. Look at the serial number. Look at the beveling on the lugs. This isn't brass. It's white gold alloy. It's rare. Extremely rare. They only made 50 of these." Leo gasped. The air rushed back into his lungs. "Really?" "Yes." Arthur lied, looking at the boy with kindness. "Your father knew what he had. It is a masterpiece." Vane leaned over the counter, squinting. Greed flashed in his eyes. He didn't know watches like Arthur did. He trusted Arthur's eye. "Let me see that again." Arthur pulled the watch back, holding it against his chest. "No. You insulted the customer. You offered him $15 for a museum piece. You don't deserve this watch." Arthur turned his back on Vane. He put a hand on Leo's shoulder. "Come with me to the back, son. Vane is a shark. I handle the private repairs. I will buy it from you." "You?" Vane laughed. "You can't afford a sandwich, old man. What are you going to buy it with?" "I have savings," Arthur said quietly. "Savings for a rainy day?" He led Leo to the back corner of the shop, behind the wire cage. It was a tiny space, cluttered with gears, springs, and ticking clocks. It smelled of oil and old wood. It was Arthur's sanctuary. Arthur sat on his stool. He placed the fake watch on his workbench. Is it really worth $400? Leo asked, his voice shaking with hope. "I need 400 exactly." Arthur looked at the cheap metal. Then he looked at Leo. "It is worth exactly what you need it to be worth," Arthur said. He reached for the old wooden clock on the shelf. He opened the back panel. He pulled out the roll of cash. It was dirty, crumpled money. Ones, fives, 20s. He had been saving it for 8 months, dollar by dollar. Arthur counted out $400. It left him with $50. Not enough for rent. Not enough for his heart medication, which cost $200 a bottle. He handed the money to Leo. "Here," Arthur said. $400. Leo took the money. He stared at it. It was wet from Arthur's hands, or maybe from the rain, or maybe from tears. Leo looked at Arthur. He started to cry again, but this time it was relief. A pure, overwhelming relief. He grabbed Arthur's hand and kissed it. "Thank you," Leo sobbed. "Thank you. You saved her. You saved Isabella. Go," Arthur said gently. "Run. Don't let the doctors wait." Leo nodded. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "I'll come back. Someday, when I'm rich, I'll come back and buy it from you for $1 million. I promise. Keep it safe for me." "I'll keep it safe," Arthur lied again. Leo turned and ran. He ran out of the cage, past a confused Mr. Vane, and out into the rainy night. The bell on the door chimed, a happy, hopeful sound. Arthur sat alone in his cage. He looked at the watch on his desk. The cheap brass was already starting to turn green from the humidity. He picked it up and put it in his pocket. "Hey, old man." Mr. Vane marched over to the cage. He looked furious. "Did you just buy that piece of junk?" Vane asked. "It's not junk to me," Arthur said softly. "You used your rent money, didn't you?" Vane sneered. He knew Arthur's situation. He knew Arthur was barely surviving. "Rent is due tonight, Arthur. $700 for the shop space and the room upstairs. You have it." Arthur looked at his hands. I need a few more days, Vane. I can work it off. I have 3 repair jobs coming in next week." "No," Vane said coldly. "I'm done with charity. You don't have the money? Then get out." "Vane, please," Arthur said, his chest starting to tighten. The stress was hurting his heart. "It's raining. I have nowhere to go. I've been here for 5 years. I'm an old man. Get out." Vane unlocked the cage door. "Pack your tools. You have 10 minutes. Whatever you leave behind is mine." Arthur stood up shakily. He didn't argue. He knew men like Vane. They didn't have hearts. They had calculators where their souls should be. Arthur took his small leather satchel. He packed his favorite screwdrivers, his loop, and a photo of his late wife. He left the heavy equipment. He left the clocks. He walked to the front door. Vane was waiting, arms crossed. "You're a fool, Arthur," Vane spat. "You threw your life away for a scam. That kid played you. That watch is worthless." Arthur paused with his hand on the doorframe. The wind blew cold rain into his face. "He didn't play me," Arthur whispered. "He saved his family. Arthur stepped out into the night. Vane slammed the door and locked it behind him. The open sign flickered off. Arthur stood on the sidewalk. He was 68 years old. He had $50 in his pocket. His chest was hurting, a sharp, squeezing pain that meant his heart was failing. He had no medicine. He had no home. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the watch. The fake, worthless watch. He held it up to the streetlight. It didn't glitter like gold. It looked dull and cheap. But to Arthur, it looked beautiful. It looked like a young girl breathing in a hospital bed. Tick-tock. Arthur whispered to the watch. Tick-tock. He put it back in his pocket and started walking down the wet alleyway, looking for a dry piece of cardboard to sleep on. He walked slowly, his breath misting in the cold air, disappearing into the shadows of the city that had forgotten him. 15 blocks away, Leo burst into the hospital lobby. He was soaked, breathless, and wild-eyed. He slammed the $400 onto the reception desk. Here, he shouted. I have it. Don't take her. I have the money. The receptionist looked surprised. She counted the wet bills. It's all here, she said. She typed into her computer. Okay, Leo. We'll process the admission. Your sister stays. Leo collapsed into a chair. He laughed. He cried. He had done it. His father's watch had saved them. He thought of the old man in the shop, the man with the kind eyes who had recognized the value of the watch. Thank you, Mr. Watchmaker, Leo whispered. Thank you for seeing the truth. Leo didn't know the truth. He didn't know that at that very moment, his savior was curling up behind a dumpster in an alley, shivering in the cold, clutching his chest as the first spasms of a heart attack began to set in. Leo sat by Isabella's bed all night. The antibiotics started to work. Her fever broke around 3 a.m. She opened her eyes and looked at him. Leo, she croaked. I'm here, Izzy, Leo said, holding her hand. I'm not going anywhere. We're safe. How? She asked sleepily. How did we pay? Dad's watch, Leo said proudly. A nice man bought it. He said it was a treasure. Isabella smiled and went back to sleep. Leo looked out the hospital window at the city lights. He made a vow then and there. I'm going to be rich one day, he told the window. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to save people like that man saved us. And I'm going to find him. The years are cruel, and the years are fast. Arthur survived that night in the alley, but only barely. The heart attack landed him in a county hospital as a John Doe. He lost his memory for a week due to the lack of oxygen. By the time he recovered, his shop was cleared out. Vane had sold his tools. Arthur had no ID, no money, and no way to prove who he was to get his property back. He fell into the cracks of the system. He moved from shelter to shelter. His health deteriorated. He became just another old man in the background of the city, a shadow that people stepped over on their way to work. But he never sold the watch. He kept it. He kept it wrapped in a piece of cloth in his pocket. Sometimes, when he was hungry or cold, he would take it out and listen to the cheap quartz ticking. It reminded him that he had done one good thing. It reminded him that he wasn't just a homeless old man. He was a savior. 15 years passed. The city changed. Skyscrapers went up. Old shops were torn down. Vane's Pawn and Loan became a trendy coffee shop. And Leo grew up. Leo kept his promise. He worked harder than anyone. He got scholarships. He worked 3 jobs through college. He went to medical school. He became Dr. Leo Rossi, the youngest chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Chicago Med. He was rich now. He wore Italian suits. He drove a Porsche. He saved lives every day. But there was a hole in his life. Every year, on October 12th, the anniversary of the day he sold the watch, he would drive to the block where the pawn shop used to be. He would walk the streets, looking for the old man with the thick glasses. He hired private investigators. He searched records for a watchmaker named Arthur. But he was looking for a successful watchmaker who bought rare antiques. He wasn't looking for a John Doe in a state nursing home. So he never found him. Until the day the universe decided it was time to collect the debt. It started with a charity gala. Isabella was 22 now. She was beautiful, smart, and working as a curator for the City History Museum. She was organizing the Time and Memory Gala to raise money for the hospital wing where Leo worked. She needed an architect to redesign the museum's grand hall for the event. She hired the best firm in the city. They sent their top architect, Julian. Julian was 29. He was handsome, sharp, and arrogant. He built steel and glass towers that looked cold and perfect. He was known for being ruthless with his designs and distant with people. He walked into the museum hall, holding a tablet, not looking at Isabella. "This lighting is terrible," Julian said, not even introducing himself. "And these pillars need to be wrapped. It looks like a tomb in here." Isabella, who had spent weeks designing the layout, felt her temper flare. "Excuse me," she said, stepping in front of him. "It's not a tomb. It's history. And who are you?" Julian looked up. He saw a woman with fire in her eyes. He paused. "I'm Julian Vance," he said. "The architect who is going to save this disaster of a party." "I'm Isabella Rossi," she shot back. "The client who can fire you in 5 seconds." They stared at each other. It was hate at first sight. Or maybe it was just spark. Julian didn't know that Isabella was the sister of the famous surgeon Leo Rossi. And Isabella didn't know that Julian's last name wasn't actually Vance. It was his mother's name. His father's name was Arthur. Julian was Arthur's grandson. The grandson who thought Arthur was dead. The grandson who had been told his whole life that Arthur was a selfish drunk who abandoned the family and drank away their inheritance. Julian hated watches. He hated history. He hated anything that reminded him of the grandfather he thought he knew. But as he stared at Isabella, he noticed something. She was wearing a necklace, a small, delicate gold chain, and hanging from it was a tiny, intricate gear from a watch. "Nice necklace," Julian said cynically. "Steampunk is a little outdated, isn't it?" Isabella touched the gear. "It's not steampunk. It's a piece of a watch my brother and I are looking for. A symbol of the man who saved us." Julian rolled his eyes. "Saved you? Let me guess, a guardian angel?" "Something like that," Isabella said. "We call him the watchmaker." Julian froze. His blood ran cold. "The watchmaker?" he repeated. "Yes." "What?" Julian shook his head, pushing down the memory of his mother crying. The memory of the police knocking on their door saying Arthur had vanished. "Nothing," Julian said coldly. "Let's get to work. I have a deadline." He turned away, but the ghost of the past had just walked into the room. And the clock was ticking. They Shady Pines nursing home didn't have pine trees, and it certainly wasn't shady. It was a brick block of a building on the edge of the city, surrounded by cracked pavement and chain-link fences. Inside, it smelled like boiled cabbage and bleach, a smell that stuck to your clothes long after you left. Julian Vance hated coming here. He hated the flickering fluorescent lights. He hated the sound of the nurse's shoes squeaking on the linoleum. But mostly, he hated visiting room 304. He stood in the doorway, adjusting his expensive Italian suit jacket. It was an armor against this place. Inside the room, an old man sat in a wheelchair by the window, staring out at the brick wall of the building next door. The old man was thin, his skin like crumpled paper. His hands, once strong enough to fix the heartbeat of a watch, now shook uncontrollably with tremors. "Hello, Arthur," Julian said. He didn't say Grandpa. He hadn't called him that in 15 years. Arthur didn't turn around. He rarely spoke anymore. The doctors said it was vascular dementia, brought on by a series of untreated strokes years ago. He was trapped in his own head, living in a loop of memories that Julian couldn't access. "I paid the bill for the month," Julian said, stepping into the room but keeping his distance. "They said you needed new slippers. I bought them. They're on the bed." Arthur mumbled something. Julian leaned in. "What?" "Tick, tock," Arthur whispered. "Tick, tock." Julian clenched his jaw. That sound. It always came back to that sound. "There are no clocks here, Arthur," Julian said coldly. "You sold them all, remember? You sold everything." Julian looked at the old man with a mixture of pity and deep, burning resentment. Julian had been 14 when Arthur disappeared. His mother, Arthur's daughter, had cried for weeks. They had lost the house. They had found out that Arthur's shop was empty, his debts unpaid. The police said he had just walked away. A voluntary disappearance. Julian had grown up believing the story his mother told him in her grief. Arthur was a secret gambler, a drunk. He had taken the family's savings and blown it on something reckless, then ran away out of shame. When the state found Arthur 5 years ago, wandering the streets as a John Doe, Julian had stepped up. Not out of love, but out of duty. He was successful now. He was a rich architect. He could afford to keep the old man in a home. It was his way of proving he was better than Arthur. Arthur had abandoned them. Julian would not abandon him, no matter how much he wanted to. "I have to go," Julian said, checking his Rolex. "I have a project. A museum. Big job. Something you wouldn't understand." Arthur turned his head slowly. His eyes behind the thick glasses were milky and confused. He looked at Julian, and for a second, there was a flash of recognition. The boy, Arthur croaked. Did the boy save her? Julian sighed. There is no boy, Arthur. Just you and me. Drink your water. Julian turned and walked out. He didn't look back. He didn't see Arthur reach into the hidden pocket of his wheelchair cushion and pull out a dull, brass watch. He didn't see the old man press it to his ear, smiling a toothless smile as he listened to the fake ticking that sounded, to him, like the most beautiful music in the world. The City History Museum was a grand, echoing space filled with shadows and marble. It was closing time. The security guards were doing their rounds, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. In the center of the Great Hall, Isabella Rossi was standing on a ladder, trying to adjust a banner that hung crookedly from a pillar. She was tired. Her feet hurt. Being a curator wasn't just about art, it was about logistics. And right now, the logistics were failing. You're going to fall, a voice said from the darkness. Isabella jumped, nearly losing her balance. She grabbed the ladder tight and looked down. Julian stood there. He had changed out of his suit jacket into a black turtleneck and jeans, but he still looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine. He was holding a roll of blueprints and looking up at her with an expression that was half annoyance, half amusement. I wasn't going to fall until you scared me, Isabella snapped. She climbed down, smoothing her skirt. What are you doing here, Julian? It's 9 p.m. The contractors left hours ago. I work when it's quiet, Julian said. He unrolled the blueprints on a display case. And I needed to remeasure the acoustics. Your idea to put the orchestra under the dome is a disaster. The echo will ruin the speeches. It's not a disaster, Isabella argued, walking over to him. It's symbolic. The dome represents the shelter of the community. It's where the music belongs. It's where the physics don't work, Julian said, tapping the paper. I'm moving the stage to the north wall. You can't, Isabella said. The north wall has the mural of the Great Fire. You can't cover history with a DJ booth. I can if I want the donors to actually hear the request for money, Julian shot back. Do you want to save the hospital wing? Or do you want to look at a painting? They stood there, glaring at each other. They had been doing this for 2 weeks, arguing over lighting, over seating, over colors. Isabella thought Julian was an arrogant robot who cared more about geometry than soul. Julian thought Isabella was a dreamy idealist who didn't understand how the real world worked. But beneath the arguing, there was something else. Isabella noticed the way Julian's hands moved when he sketched, precise, artistic, confident. Julian noticed the way Isabella bit her lip when she was thinking, and the way her eyes lit up when she talked about the charity. Fine, Isabella sighed. We'll test it. Clap your hands. Julian blinked. What? Stand under the dome and clap. Let's hear this terrible echo you're so worried about. Julian groaned, but he walked to the center of the room. He raised his hands to clap. Boom. It wasn't a clap. It was thunder. Outside, the storm that had been threatening Chicago all day finally broke. Lightning flashed through the skylights, illuminating the museum in stark white light. The thunder shook the floor. And then, the lights went out. The museum plunged into total darkness. Great. Julian's voice came from the black void. Just great. Emergency lights should kick in, Isabella said, her voice trembling slightly. She hated the dark. It reminded her of the nights in the cheap motels after her dad left. A few dim yellow bulbs flickered on near the exits, but the great hall remained mostly in shadow. I'm going to check the breaker box in the service corridor, Julian said. Stay here. No way, Isabella said, reaching out and grabbing his arm. I'm coming with you. I don't have a flashlight. Julian felt her hand on his arm. Her fingers were warm. He didn't pull away. He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. Come on, he said. They walked through the shadowy museum, past the dinosaur skeletons that looked like monsters in the dim light, past the statues of old kings. They reached the service elevator that led to the basement maintenance room. Julian hit the button. The elevator opened. It was on a separate emergency circuit. They stepped inside. The doors closed. The elevator started to descend. And then, with a grinding screech of metal on metal, it stopped. The overhead light in the elevator flickered and died. They were trapped. You have got to be kidding me, Julian muttered. He hit the emergency button. Nothing. The storm must have knocked out the backup relays. We're stuck, Isabella whispered. She backed into the corner of the small metal box. wrapping her arms around herself. Her breathing started to get fast and shallow. Julian shone his phone light on her. He saw the panic in her eyes. It wasn't just annoyance. It was terror. "Hey," Julian said, his voice softening. "It's okay. The guards will do a sweep. They'll find us." "The guards left at 8, Isabella wheezed. "It's just us. And the air, it feels thin." Julian realized she was having a panic attack. He forgot about the blueprints. He forgot about the argument. He stepped closer to her. "Isabella, look at me," he said. He sat down on the floor of the elevator and patted the spot next to him. "Sit down. The air is fine. It's a big shaft. We have plenty of oxygen." Isabella slid down the wall next to him. She was shaking. "I hate small spaces," she admitted, her voice small. "When I was little, before my brother Leo fixed things, we lived in a car for a while. It was so small." Julian looked at her. The tough, professional curator was gone. "I didn't know that," Julian said. "I thought you were, I don't know, privileged." Isabella laughed, a dry, nervous sound. "Privileged? Julian, 15 years ago, I was dying in a charity ward because my dad left us with $5 to our names. I'm not privileged. I'm lucky. There's a difference." Julian leaned his head back against the metal wall. He turned off his phone light to save the battery. They sat in the dark, shoulder to shoulder. "I'm sorry," Julian said. "I shouldn't have been a jerk about the mural." "You were just doing your job," Isabella said. "You want it to be perfect. Why are you so obsessed with perfection anyway?" Julian was silent for a long time. The darkness made it easier to speak. "Because my family is a mess," Julian said. "My grandfather, he was a craftsman, a watchmaker. He could fix anything, but he couldn't fix himself." Isabella turned her head toward him in the dark. "What happened to him?" "He was an addict," Julian said bitterly. "Gambling, maybe drinking. We never knew for sure. But one day, when I was 14, he just sold everything. He emptied his bank accounts, sold his tools, and vanished. He left my mom with nothing but debts. I build things that are strong, things that don't fall apart, because I spent my childhood watching my family collapse." Isabella reached out and found his hand in the dark. She squeezed it. "I understand," she said. "My dad left too. It makes you feel like you aren't enough." "Exactly," Julian whispered. "But not everyone leaves," Isabella said softly. "Some people stay, or some people save you." "Like your brother?" "Yes. And the watchmaker." Julian stiffened. "You mentioned him before. Who is he?" "I don't know his name," Isabella said. "I was 7. I was in the hospital, and the doctors were going to kick me out because we couldn't pay. Leo, he was just a kid. He ran to a pawn shop with a fake watch my dad left. He thought it was real." Julian listened, his heart beating a little faster. "The shop owner was going to throw him out," Isabella continued. "But there was an old man there, a repairman. He stepped in. He lied. He told the owner the watch was a masterpiece. He bought it from Leo for $400. It was everything he had. Leo saw the roll of cash. It was ones and fives. It was poor man's money." Isabella's voice choked up. "He saved my life, Julian. He gave everything to a stranger. Leo went back to find him later, to pay him back, but the shop was gone. The man was gone. We owe him everything." Julian sat there, stunned. The story was beautiful. It was heroic. But his mind immediately rejected it. It couldn't be Arthur. Arthur was selfish. Arthur took money. He didn't give it. Arthur had abandoned them. "That sounds like a fairy tale," Julian said, his voice guarded. "People don't do that. Not in the real world." "He did," Isabella insisted. "He is the reason I believe in good people. He is the reason I curate history. Because I want to preserve the stories of people like him." Julian turned to look at her, even though he couldn't see her face clearly. He felt a pull toward her that terrified him. She had so much faith. He had none. "I wish I could believe that," Julian said. "You can," Isabella whispered. She leaned her head on his shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it broke the last barrier between them. Julian turned his face toward hers. He could feel her breath on his cheek. "Isabella," he breathed. He found her lips in the dark. It wasn't a desperate kiss. It was slow. It was searching. It was the meeting of two lonely people who had built walls around their hearts to keep out the pain of the past. Isabella kissed him back, her hand coming up to touch his face. His stubble scratched her palm. She felt safe with him, despite his cold exterior. She felt that underneath the architect's armor, there was a boy who just missed his grandfather. They pulled apart slowly. The silence in the elevator wasn't scary anymore. It was electric. We should probably try the emergency button again, Isabella whispered, her voice husky. In a minute, Julian said. Let's just wait a minute. They sat there for an hour, holding hands, talking about small things. Favorite foods. The worst movies they had ever seen. They were building a foundation. Suddenly, the elevator jolted. The lights buzzed on, blinding them. The doors slid open. 3 security guards and a firefighter stood there, looking down at them. Ms. Rossi, Mr. Vance, are you okay? Julian and Isabella stood up quickly, dropping hands like guilty teenagers. They blinked in the harsh light. We're fine, Julian said, smoothing his shirt. Just a mechanical failure. Isabella smoothed her hair. Her face was flushed. She looked at Julian, and a secret smile passed between them. But the moment was interrupted by a voice from the hallway. Bella. Isabella's head snapped up. Leo. Dr. Leo Rossi was running down the museum hallway, still wearing his blue scrubs from the hospital. He looked frantic. I called you 10 times, Leo said, rushing over and grabbing his sister by the shoulders. The storm knocked out the cell towers. I tracked your phone. Are you hurt? I'm fine, Leo, Isabella said, hugging him. Julian was with me. Leo turned his gaze to Julian. Leo was 27 now, but he had the intensity of a man much older. He was protective. He was sharp. He looked Julian up and down, assessing him like a medical problem. You're the architect, Leo said flatly. Julian Vance, Julian said, extending his hand. Leo took it. His grip was like a vice. Thanks for keeping her safe. She kept me safe, Julian said, looking at Isabella. Leo's eyes narrowed. He saw the look passing between them. He saw the blush on his sister's cheeks. He realized something had happened in that elevator. But then, Leo's eyes dropped to Julian's chest, to the lapel of his black turtleneck. Julian had pinned a small, vintage brooch there. It was his signature style. It was a tiny, gold-plated gear. A watch movement wheel. Leo froze. He didn't let go of Julian's hand. That pin, Leo said, his voice dropping an octave. Where did you get that? Julian looked down. Oh, this. It was in a box of my grandfather's old junk. I wear it to remind me not to make his mistakes. Your grandfather, Leo repeated. He leaned in closer. Was he a watchmaker? Julian laughed, a short, humorless sound. He called himself one. He was mostly just a tinkerer who lost his mind. Leo stared at the gear. It was distinctive. It had a specific, hand-filed notch in the spoke. Leo remembered seeing a man filing a gear just like that, 15 years ago, behind a wire cage in a pawn shop. Leo looked at Julian's face. He searched for a resemblance. The eyes, there was something in the shape of the eyes. What was his name? Leo asked. The question was intense, demanding. Julian pulled his hand back, annoyed by the interrogation. Arthur. His name was Arthur. The world stopped for Leo. Arthur. The name he had whispered in his prayers for 15 years. Arthur, Leo whispered. Yes, Julian said, stepping back, putting a protective hand on Isabella's back. Look, it's been a long night. I'm going to take Isabella home. No, Leo said. I'll take her. Leo stepped between them. He needed to think. He needed to be sure. If this arrogant, cynical architect was the grandson of the saint who saved them, why did he speak of him with such hate? And if Arthur was Julian's grandfather, where was he? Is he alive? Leo asked suddenly. Julian frowned. Who? Your grandfather. Arthur. Julian sighed. Barely. He's in a home on the south side. Look, why the 20 questions? Just curiosity, Leo lied. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He sounds interesting. Trust me, Julian said, taking Isabella's hand again, defying Leo. He's not. He's just an old man who made a lot of bad choices. Julian looked at Isabella. I'll call you tomorrow. Yes, Isabella breathed. Julian walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty museum. Leo watched him go. He watched the man who hated the hero Leo loved. Leo, what is wrong with you? Isabella asked, hitting his arm. You were so rude. Leo turned to his sister. He looked at her necklace with the gear. Then he looked at the door where Julian had exited. Izzy, Leo said, his voice shaking. We have to go to the south side tomorrow. Why? Because, Leo said, I think I just found him. The next morning, the sun rose over Chicago, bright and cold. In the nursing home, Arthur sat by the window. He was holding the fake gold watch in his trembling hands. He polished the dull brass with his thumb. He didn't know that a storm was coming. Not a storm of rain and wind, but a storm of truth. His grandson hated him. The boy he saved was hunting him. And the lie he told 15 years ago was about to be exposed. Arthur looked at the watch. The battery had died years ago. The hands were frozen at 8 o'clock. The time of the deadline. Tick-tock. Arthur whispered to the silence. Tick-tock. But the clock had started moving again. The next 3 days felt like a storm was brewing. Even though the skies over Chicago were clear and blue, Leo couldn't focus. He was the chief of cardiothoracic surgery, a man who held human hearts in his hands every day, but his own heart was racing out of control. He sat in his office on the top floor of the hospital, staring at a name on a sticky note. Arthur Vance. He had run a background check. It was illegal to use hospital resources for personal matters, but Leo didn't care. He found the records. Arthur Vance, 83 years old, resident of Shady Pines Nursing Home, ward of the state. Leo looked at the photo in the file. It was a mugshot from when Arthur was found wandering the streets 5 years ago. The man in the photo was gaunt, bearded, and looked confused. He didn't look like the sharp, kind watchmaker Leo remembered. But the eyes were the same. Leo picked up his phone. He called Isabella. "Did you talk to Julian?" Leo asked without saying hello. "Leo, stop," Isabella sighed. She sounded happy, which annoyed him. "I'm at the museum. Julian is here. We're finalizing the lighting for the gala. Ask him about the watch," Leo pressed. "Ask him if his grandfather ever mentioned a boy." "I can't just interrogate him, Leo. He's sensitive about his family. He thinks his grandfather ruined their lives. If I push too hard, I'll push him away." "Izzy, this is important." "So is my relationship," Isabella said firmly. "I like him, Leo. He's damaged, yes, but he's brilliant. And he's kind, deep down. Just give it time." She hung up. Leo slammed the phone down. Time. That was the one thing they might not have. At the museum, the atmosphere was different. It was electric. Julian and Isabella were walking through the grand hall, their shoulders brushing. The tension from the elevator was still there, but now it wasn't fear. It was attraction. Julian was pointing at the ceiling arch. "If we hang the chandeliers here, the light will hit the floor perfectly. It won't be a tomb. It will be a cathedral." Isabella smiled. "See? I told you. History can be beautiful." Julian looked at her. He forgot about the chandeliers. He forgot about the deadline. He just saw her. "You were right," Julian admitted softly. "About a lot of things." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her neck. Isabella leaned into his touch. "Julian," she whispered. "Yeah. Tell me about him." "Arthur." Julian's hand froze. He pulled back, his face closing off like a shutter. "Why does everyone keep asking about him?" Julian snapped. "First your brother, now you." "Because you carry so much anger," Isabella said gently. "It's heavy, Julian. I can see it." Julian walked over to the window, looking out at the city skyline he helped build. "He was a genius," Julian said, his voice bitter. "He could fix anything. Clocks, radios, music boxes. People came from all over the state to see him. I used to sit in his shop and watch him work. I thought he was a magician. What changed? He changed. My grandmother died, and he broke. He started disappearing at night. Money started missing from the safe. My mom would cry in the kitchen. And then, one rainy night in October, 15 years ago, he just vanished. He sold his tools. He emptied the accounts. He left us with nothing but a note that said, 'I'm sorry.'" Julian turned to Isabella, his eyes wet with unshed tears. "He chose money over us, Isabella. He chose his addiction over his family. So don't ask me to forgive him. I pay for his nursing home because I'm a decent man, not because he deserves it." Isabella looked at him. She wanted to tell him about the watchmaker. She wanted to tell him that maybe, just maybe, Arthur had a reason. But she saw the pain in Julian's face, and she knew he wasn't ready to hear it. Suddenly, Julian's phone rang. It was a jarring, loud ringtone that echoed in the empty museum. Julian frowned. He pulled it out. "It's the nursing home." He answered. "This is Julian." Isabella watched his face. She saw the color drain out of it. She saw his hand grip the phone so tight his knuckles turned white. "When?" Julian asked. His voice was trembling. Okay, I'm coming. Don't. Just keep him alive. I'm coming." He hung up. He looked at Isabella. He looked terrified. "It's Arthur," Julian whispered. "He had a massive heart attack. They're taking him to the hospital." "Which hospital?" Isabella asked, grabbing her purse. Chicago Med, Julian said. Your brother's hospital. The emergency room at Chicago Med was chaos. It was a Friday night, which meant car accidents, bar fights, and overdoses. But when the ambulance arrived carrying Arthur Vance, the paramedics shouted for a cardiac team. Leo was in his office when his pager went off. Code blue. ER Bay 4. He didn't usually respond to ER codes. He was the chief of surgery, but he was restless. He needed to do something with his hands. He ran down the stairs. He burst into Bay 4. A team of nurses and a resident doctor were surrounding a gurney. They were doing CPR on an old man. Status. Leo barked, snapping on gloves. Male, 83, severe myocardial infarction. The resident shouted over the noise of the defibrillator. No pulse. We've shocked him twice. Leo stepped up. He looked at the patient. The man was thin, his chest sunken. His beard was gray and unkempt. His eyes were closed. He looked like a ghost. Leo didn't recognize him. He had been looking for a watchmaker with thick glasses and a kind smile. He wasn't looking for this frail, dying stranger. Clear, Leo ordered. He placed the paddles on the man's chest. Thump. The body arched off the table. The monitor whined. A flatline. Again. Leo yelled. Charge to 200. Thump. The monitor beeped. Beep, beep, beep. A rhythm. Weak, thready, but there. We have a rhythm, the nurse said. But he needs a bypass immediately. His arteries are completely blocked. Leo looked at the monitor. The man was dying. He had minutes, maybe less. Prep or one, Leo commanded. I'm taking him up. Call his emergency contact. Contact is already here, the nurse said. He's in the waiting room. Leo didn't have time to go to the waiting room. He ran alongside the gurney as they rushed toward the elevators. He looked down at the old man's face. There was something about the shape of his nose. The way his hands were calloused, even now. Leo shook his head. Focus. He had a life to save. In the waiting room, Julian was pacing back and forth, tearing at his hair. Isabella sat in a chair, watching him. He's going to die, Julian muttered. He's going to die, and the last thing I said to him was that he sold everything. Julian, come sit down, Isabella said gently. Leo is the best surgeon in the city. If anyone can save him, it's Leo. Julian stopped. He looked at her. Your brother? Yes. He's on call tonight. Julian let out a breath. Okay. He sat down, bouncing his leg nervously. I need to do something. I can't just sit here. He stood up again. I have his locker key. The nursing home called and said I need to clear out his personal effects because if he dies, they give the room away immediately. They're vultures. I'll come with you, Isabella said. No, Julian said. Stay here. In case the doctor comes out. I need to go get his things. It will keep me busy. It's just down the street. Are you sure? Yes. Please. Just stay here and call me if anything changes. Julian ran out of the hospital. He needed to be alone. He needed to drive. He needed to scream. He drove to Shady Pines. The drive took 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. He marched past the front desk, ignoring the receptionist who tried to offer condolences. He went straight to room 304. The room was empty. The bed was stripped. It looked like Arthur had never been there. Julian went to the small metal locker in the corner. He used the key on his keychain. He opened it. There wasn't much. A few pairs of socks, a toothbrush, an old, moth-eaten cardigan sweater, and a rusted tin box. Julian took the box. It was heavy. He sat on the empty bed and placed the box on his lap. He remembered this box. Arthur used to keep it on the top shelf of his workshop. He used to tell Julian, "This is the treasure chest, Jules. Don't touch it." Julian's hands shook as he opened the lid. He expected to find nothing. Maybe old lottery tickets. Maybe empty flask bottles. Evidence of the addiction that destroyed their family. Instead, he found a small, black leather journal. And wrapped in a greasy rag, a watch. Julian picked up the watch first. He unwrapped it. He frowned. It was ugly. It was a fake Patek Philippe. The gold plating was worn off, revealing cheap brass underneath. The glass face was scratched. It looked like something you would win at a carnival. Trash, Julian whispered, tears stinging his eyes. You kept trash. He almost threw it across the room. But something stopped him. Why would Arthur keep this? Arthur knew quality. Arthur hated fakes. He put the watch down and picked up the journal. It was old. The leather was cracked. He opened it. It wasn't a gambling ledger. It wasn't a list of debts. It was a diary. Julian started reading. The entries were sporadic. Most of them were about the weather or about a particularly difficult repair job on a grandfather clock. Then, he found the entry for October 12, 2009. The handwriting was shaky, but clear. October 12th. Rainy. Business is slow. Vane is threatening to kick me out tomorrow if I don't pay the $700 rent. I have $450 saved in the hollow clock. It took me 8 months. I was going to pay him half and beg for time. Then the boy came in. Julian froze. He sat up straighter. 12 years old. Soaking wet. He was trying to sell a watch. A fake. A cheap piece of brass junk. He told Vane it was gold. He was crying. He said his sister was in the hospital. Pneumonia. They were going to take her away if he didn't pay $400 tonight. Vane laughed at him. Vane broke the boy's heart. I looked at the boy. He had eyes like Julian. Scared. Desperate. I looked at my money. My rent. My heart pills. It was my life savings. But I couldn't let the girl be taken. I couldn't let the boy be broken. So I lied. Julian stopped breathing. The room started to spin. I told Vane the watch was a masterpiece. A prototype. I told the boy I would buy it. I gave him the $400. All of it. I kept $50 for food. The boy ran to save his sister. He promised to come back when he was rich. I hope he makes it. Vane kicked me out 10 minutes later. I am writing this by the light of a street lamp in the alley behind the shop. It is cold. My chest hurts. I don't have my pills. I am homeless now. My daughter will never forgive me. She will think I failed her. Julian will think I am a loser. But the girl is safe. The boy is a hero. I kept the watch. It is worthless brass. But to me, it is the most valuable thing in the world. It is the price of a soul. If I die tonight, at least I did one good thing. Julian dropped the journal. It hit the floor with a thud. He stared at the wall. The silence of the nursing home was deafening. "Oh my God," Julian whispered. He put his hand over his mouth. A sob ripped out of his throat. It wasn't a sad sob. It was a sound of pure, agonizing regret. For 15 years, he had hated this man. He had called him a drunk, a gambler, a failure. But Arthur hadn't lost the money. He had given it away. He had chosen to be homeless to save 2 children he didn't even know. "You didn't abandon us," Julian cried to the empty room. "You sacrificed yourself." He grabbed the watch. He grabbed the journal. He ran out of the room. He ran to his car. He drove like a madman back to the hospital. In operating room 1, the atmosphere was tense. The only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor and the hiss of the ventilator. Leo stood over Arthur's open chest. He was working with a precision that was almost robotic. He was clamping arteries, stitching veins. "The blockage is severe," Leo said calmly. "Triple vessel disease. The heart muscle is weak." He looked at the heart beating in the chest cavity. It was scarred. It was tired. It was a heart that had been broken a long time ago. "Scalpel," Leo said. As he worked, a strange feeling washed over him. He felt connected to this man. He didn't know why. Maybe it was just the stress of the night. Or maybe it was because this man had nobody else. "Don't die on me," Leo whispered behind his mask. "Not tonight." Julian burst into the hospital waiting room. He was sweating, his hair wild. He was clutching the tin box. "Isabella," he shouted. Isabella jumped up. "Julian? What happened? Did you find something?" Julian ran to her. He shoved the tin box into her hands. "Look at it," Julian gasped. "Look at the watch." Isabella looked confused. She opened the box. She unwrapped the rag. She saw the watch. It was a cheap, gold-plated fake. It was ugly. "It's just a watch, Julian," Isabella said. "Why are you so upset?" "Turn it over," Julian said. "Read the back." Isabella turned the watch over. The brass case was scratched and tarnished. But there, etched into the metal with a pocket knife, were crudely carved letters. 2 initials. L.R. Isabella stopped breathing. Her hands started to shake. She dropped the rag. She remembered that night. She remembered Leo sitting by her hospital bed, telling her he had marked the watch so he could find it again one day. "Leo Rossi, where did you get this?" Isabella whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "My grandfather's locker," Julian said, tears streaming down his face. "He bought it 15 years ago. He bought it from a boy who needed money for his sister." Isabella looked up at Julian. Her eyes were wide with shock. "Leo," she choked out. It was Leo. She grabbed the journal. She opened it to the marked page. She read the words. "Bought a fake watch, Sister in the hospital. Vane kicked me out. Homeless. He knew, Isabella cried. He knew it was fake. He gave us everything. He became homeless for us. Julian fell to his knees in the middle of the waiting room. I hated him, he sobbed. I hated him for 15 years. I thought he was a drunk. And he was a hero. Isabella grabbed Julian's face. He is Leo's hero. He is the watchmaker. She looked at the operating room doors. Leo is operating on him right now. Isabella realized. Leo is holding his heart. He doesn't know, Julian said. We have to tell him. We can't interrupt the surgery, Isabella said. But we have to be there when he wakes up. She pulled Julian to his feet. Come on. They ran to the elevators. They went up to the observation deck that overlooked the ore. Through the glass, they could see Leo. He was bent over the table, his hands deep in Arthur's chest. He was fighting for Arthur's life with everything he had. Isabella pressed the watch against the glass. Save him, Leo, she whispered. Save him like he saved us. 2 hours later, the surgery was over. Leo walked out of the ore, pulling off his surgical cap. He looked exhausted. His scrubs were stained with blood. He walked into the recovery waiting area. Julian and Isabella were standing there. They looked like they had seen a ghost. He made it, Leo said, rubbing his eyes. It was close. His heart, it's been through a lot. But he's stable. He's going to live. Julian let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He collapsed into a chair. Leo frowned. He looked at Isabella. What is going on? Why are you guys looking at me like that? Isabella walked up to him. She held out her hand. In her palm lay the fake gold watch. Leo froze. He stared at it. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. He reached out slowly. His surgeon's hands, usually so steady, were trembling. He picked up the watch. He ran his thumb over the scratched initials on the back. LR. He looked at Isabella. Then he looked at Julian. Where? Leo whispered. It was in his locker, Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. It was the only thing he kept. He's the watchmaker, Leo. Arthur is the watchmaker. Leo looked at the watch. Then he looked at the doors to the recovery room where the old man was sleeping. The memory hit him like a freight train. The rainy night. The pawn shop. The kind eyes behind the thick glasses. It is worth exactly what you need it to be worth. Leo realized that the man he had been searching for, the rich, successful antique dealer he imagined, didn't exist. His hero was the homeless man he had passed on the street 1,000 times. His hero was the patient he had just cut open. Leo's knees gave out. He sat down on the floor of the hospital hallway, clutching the cheap brass watch to his chest. He started to cry. He cried for the years he had lost. He cried for the suffering Arthur had endured. He cried for the sheer, impossible beauty of a stranger's kindness. Isabella sat down next to him, wrapping her arms around him. Julian sat on his other side. The three of them sat there on the floor, bound together by a secret that had taken 15 years to come to light. He knew, Leo wept. He knew it was fake, and he bought it anyway. He wrote it in his journal, Julian said softly. He said it was the best deal he ever made. Leo stood up. He wiped his face. He looked at the recovery room doors. I need to see him, Leo said. He's still sedated, Isabella warned. I don't care, Leo said. I need to be there when he opens his eyes. Leo walked into the recovery room. The lights were dim. Arthur lay in the bed, a tube in his nose, monitors beeping softly. Leo walked to the bedside. He looked at the face he had saved. Now that he knew, he saw it. He saw the structure of the face that had smiled at him 15 years ago. Leo took Arthur's frail, calloused hand. He placed the fake watch in Arthur's palm and curled the old man's fingers around it. I found you, Leo whispered. I finally found you. Arthur's eyelids fluttered. The sedation was wearing off. He groaned softly. Arthur, Leo said. Can you hear me? Arthur's eyes opened. They were foggy at first, then they focused. He looked at Leo. He looked at the successful doctor in the blue scrubs. He blinked. The boy, Arthur rasped, his voice barely a whisper. The boy with the rain. Leo smiled, tears running down his face into his mask. It's me, Leo said. I'm the boy, and I kept my promise. I came back. Arthur looked at the watch in his hand. A small, weak smile touched his lips. Tick-tock, Arthur whispered. Tick-tock, Leo replied. And for the first time in 15 years, the time was exactly right. The silence in the hospital recovery room was heavy, but it wasn't the heavy silence of grief anymore. It was the silence of a bridge being built across a 15-year canyon. Arthur lay in the bed, propped up by pillows. His skin was still pale, but the color was returning to his cheeks. The heart monitor beeped a steady, reassuring rhythm. He held the cheap brass watch in his hand, running his thumb over the scratched initials on the back. Leo sat on the edge of the bed. He had taken off his blood-stained surgical gown, revealing a wrinkled dress shirt underneath. He looked less like the chief of surgery and more like the 12-year-old boy who had begged for help in the rain. "You knew," Leo said softly. "You looked at it with your loupe. You knew it was worth nothing." Arthur smiled weakly. His voice was raspy from the ventilator tube. "It wasn't worth nothing, Leo. It was the price of your sister's life. To me, that made it the most expensive watch in the world." "But you gave everything," Leo insisted. "You let Vane kick you out. You slept on the street. You had a heart attack because you didn't have your medicine. Why? Why did you do it for strangers?" Arthur looked out the window at the city lights. "Because I had already failed the people I loved," he whispered. "My wife was gone. My daughter. I couldn't help her when she needed me. I was too proud, too stuck in my own head. When you walked into that shop, soaking wet and terrified, I saw a chance. A chance to balance the ledger. A chance to save one family, even if I couldn't save my own." The door to the room creaked open. Julian stood there. He looked like a man who had been broken apart and put back together wrong. His eyes were red. He was holding the old leather journal against his chest. Arthur looked at him. His eyes widened with a mix of fear and hope. He hadn't seen his grandson since Julian was a teenager with braces. Now, he saw a man in a black turtleneck, successful and sharp. "Julian," Arthur breathed. Julian walked into the room. His legs felt heavy. He stopped at the foot of the bed. For 15 years, he had rehearsed what he would say if he ever saw his grandfather again. He had planned to scream. He had planned to demand an explanation for the gambling, the drinking, the abandonment. But the journal was burning a hole in his hand. The truth had burned away the anger, leaving only shame. "I read it," Julian said, his voice cracking. "I read the entry from October 12th. Arthur looked down at his hands. "I'm sorry, Julian. I'm sorry I left. I was ashamed. I had nothing left to give you. I didn't want you to see me sleeping in an alley." "You didn't lose the money gambling," Julian said, tears spilling over. "You gave it away. You were a hero, and I called you a coward." Julian fell to his knees at the side of the bed. He buried his face in the mattress, sobbing like a child. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I'm so sorry. I left you in that nursing home. I treated you like a burden." Arthur reached out. His hand shook, but he managed to rest it on Julian's head. He stroked his grandson's hair, just like he used to when Julian was a boy sitting at his workbench. "It's okay, Jules," Arthur whispered. "It's okay. You didn't know. Time fixes the cracks if you let it." Isabella stepped into the room from the hallway. She had been watching, giving them a moment. She walked over to the bed. Arthur looked at her. He squinted. "Is that?" "It's Isabella," Leo said. "The girl in the hospital bed." Isabella took Arthur's other hand. She kissed his knuckles. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for my life." Arthur looked at the three of them. The surgeon, the architect, and the curator. 3 successful, alive people. All because of one lie he told on a rainy Tuesday. "Look at you," Arthur murmured, tears leaking from his eyes. "My investment, it paid off very well." The next few weeks were a blur of activity, but this time, it was the good kind. Arthur was moved out of the ICU and into the VIP suite of the hospital. Leo personally oversaw his recovery. He put Arthur on the best medication money could buy. There were no more state-run nursing homes. Arthur was coming home with Julian. Julian had cleared out his spare room, which he used as a drafting studio, and turned it into a bedroom for Arthur. He bought a new workbench. He bought sets of precision screwdrivers. He wanted his grandfather to hear the ticking of clocks again. But Leo wasn't done. Leo had made a promise 15 years ago. "I'll come back when I'm rich." He sat in his office, looking at a bank check. He wrote the number. $1 million. He put the check in his pocket. He called Julian. "Meet me in the lobby," Leo said. "Bring Isabella. We have one more stop to make." They drove in Leo's car. They drove out of the shiny downtown district, past the hospital, and into the older, grittier part of the city. They pulled up to the curb on a street that looked like it hadn't changed in 20 years. There it was. The neon sign was buzzing and flickering, half the letters burned out. Vane's Pawn and Loan. Julian stared at the shop. "It's still here. Cockroaches survive everything," Leo said grimly. "Let's go." The 3 of them walked in. The bell above the door chimed, the same sound that had haunted Arthur's dreams. The shop was exactly the same, dusty, cluttered with broken guitars and stolen lawnmowers. And behind the counter sat Mr. Vane. He was older now. He was bald, and he had gotten fatter. He was eating a sandwich, dropping crumbs onto the glass counter. He looked up as they entered. He saw 3 people in expensive suits. He wiped his mouth, his eyes lighting up with greed. "Welcome, folks," Vane wheezed. "Looking to buy? I got some high-end electronics in the back. Just came in." Leo stepped up to the counter. He placed his hands on the glass. "I'm not looking for electronics," Leo said. "I'm looking for a memory." Vane frowned. "What? Do you remember a Tuesday night?" Leo asked calmly. 15 years ago. It was raining. A boy came in here with a gold watch." Vane laughed nervously. "Buddy, I see 100 people a week. You think I remember 15 years ago?" "You might remember this," Julian said. He stepped forward. "You had a tenant. An old man. A watchmaker named Arthur." Vane's face changed. The fake smile dropped. He recognized the name. "Arthur," Vane spat. "Yeah, crazy old bat. Rented the corner. Stopped paying rent, so I kicked him out." "What about him? He owe you money too?" "No," Leo said. "He owes us nothing. But you owe him everything." Leo reached into his pocket. He pulled out the fake brass watch. He slammed it onto the counter. Vane looked at it. He squinted. "I remember that piece of junk," Vane chuckled. "Arthur spent his rent money on that trash. Said it was a prototype. Idiot. It wasn't trash," Leo said, his voice rising. "It was the only thing standing between my sister and the street. Arthur knew it was fake. He bought it to save us. And because of that, you threw him out into the rain to die." Vane shrugged. "Business is business. If you can't pay, you don't stay. That's the rule." "I have a new rule," Leo said. He pulled the check from his pocket. He slammed it down next to the watch. Vane looked at the check. He saw the number. $1 million. His eyes almost popped out of his head. What is this?" Vane stammered. "That," Leo said, "is the purchase price." "For the watch?" Vane asked, his hands reaching for the check. Leo snatched the check back. "No, for the building." Vane blinked. "The building? This place isn't for sale." "It is now," Julian said. He pulled out a legal document from his briefcase. "I did a title search this morning. You don't own the building, Vane. You lease it. And the lease is up for renewal next month. The landlord is very interested in selling. In fact, he already accepted our offer." Julian smiled. It was a shark smile. "We bought the building this morning," Julian said. "You're trespassing." Vane's face turned purple. "You can't do that. I have a business here. I have rights." "Business is business," Leo repeated Vane's words back to him cold as ice. "If you can't pay, you don't stay. You have 10 minutes to pack your personal effects. Whatever you leave behind is ours." Vane looked at them. He looked at the check that wasn't for him. He looked at the lease documents. He realized he had lost. "You're ruining me," Vane whispered. "No," Isabella said, stepping forward. "We're just cleaning up the mess." Vane scrambled. He grabbed his cash box. He grabbed his coat. He ran out the door, cursing them, disappearing into the city just like Arthur had all those years ago. But unlike Arthur, no one would be looking for Mr. Vane. Leo looked around the empty, dirty shop. He looked at the wire cage in the corner where Arthur used to sit. "What now?" Julian asked. Leo picked up the fake watch. "Now," Leo said, "we build something that matters." 6 months later, the neon sign for Vane's Pawn and Loan was gone. In its place was a beautiful, hand-carved wooden sign that read, "The Arthur Foundation." The windows were clean. The grime was gone. Inside, the shop had been transformed. The wire cages were removed. The walls were painted a warm cream color. There were comfortable chairs, desks, and computers. It wasn't a pawn shop anymore. It was a community center. Isabella walked through the front door, holding a clipboard. She was directing a team of volunteers who were stacking boxes of food and medical supplies. "The free clinic opens at noon," Isabella called out. "Make sure the waiting area is ready." In the back, where the repair cage used to be, there was now a beautiful, glass-walled office. Arthur sat at a workbench. He looked healthy. He was wearing a new tweed suit and a pair of glasses that actually fit. His hands still shook a little, but he was holding a screwdriver. Julian sat next to him. "Steady," Julian said gently. "Just turn it a quarter inch." Arthur turned the screw. The antique clock on the table ticked. Tock, tick, tock. "Perfect," Arthur said, smiling. You have good hands, Julian. Better than mine. I learned from the best, Julian said. Leo walked in. He was wearing his white coat. He came to the foundation every Tuesday and Thursday to run the free medical clinic for people who didn't have insurance. People like his family used to be. How is the patient? Leo asked, nodding at the clock. Making a full recovery, Arthur said. Just like me. Leo smiled. He reached into his pocket. I have something for the display case, Leo said. He walked to the center of the room. There was a pedestal there, covered in velvet, under a bulletproof glass cube. It looked like it should hold a diamond or a crown. Leo unlocked the case. He took the fake brass watch out of his pocket. He placed it gently on the velvet pillow. Next to it was a small plaque. It read, "The watchmaker's gift value. Priceless. The lie that told the truth." Arthur stood up and walked over. He looked at the cheap watch sitting in the place of honor. You kept your promise, Arthur said, looking at Leo. You said you'd buy it back for $1 million. I did, Leo said. I put the $1 million into this building, into this foundation. Every person we help, every bill we pay. That's the payment, Arthur. Arthur wiped a tear from his eye. It's a good trade. It's the best deal I ever made, Leo corrected him. 1 month later, the church bells were ringing. It was a perfect spring day in Chicago. The tulips were blooming along Michigan Avenue. Inside the cathedral, hundreds of people were waiting. Julian stood at the altar. He looked nervous. He adjusted his tie. Leo stood next to him as the best man, grinning. Breathe, Leo whispered. She's not going to run away. I'm not worried about her, Julian whispered back. I'm worried about him. He insisted on walking without his cane. The organ music swelled. The doors at the back of the church opened. Isabella stood there. She looked breathtaking in white lace. She held a bouquet of wildflowers. And standing next to her, offering his arm, was Arthur. He stood tall. He walked slowly, but with dignity. He looked at the crowd. He looked at his grandson waiting at the altar. He looked at the boy he had saved, now a man. And he looked at the girl he had saved, now a bride. He walked her down the aisle. Every step was a victory. Every step was a tick of the clock he thought had stopped long ago. When they reached the front, Arthur kissed Isabella's cheek. He took her hand and placed it in Julian's. Take care of her, Arthur said to Julian. She's precious. I know, Julian said. I learned from you. Arthur stepped back. He sat in the front row next to Leo. The ceremony began. Dearly beloved, the priest said, we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of two souls. Leo leaned over to Arthur. You know, Leo whispered, none of this would have happened if you had just told the truth that night. Arthur smiled. He patted his chest pocket, where a new, real gold watch, a gift from Leo, was ticking steadily against his healed heart. Sometimes, Arthur whispered back, the truth is just a fact. But a story can change the world. Leo looked at his sister saying, I do. He looked at the old man who gave everything. Tick-tock, Leo whispered. Tick-tock, Arthur agreed. The couple kissed. The church erupted in cheers. And in the center of the city, in a building that used to be a place of despair, the doors of the Arthur Foundation opened, and a line of people walked in to find hope. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment below where you are watching from.